study of the Scriptures, what they're teaching does not fit. It doesn't work. You can't take what's going on over in the book of Revelation where He wipes all tears from their eyes. There's no more death. How y'all like it? No more by dying no more. You know, incidentally, that guy you was talking about, that he's a son-in-law to some friends of ours. They called us and said, our son-in-law about to die. Dr. Graham said, because their daughter married him, and some folks, I was their pastor in Kentucky. And they called and sent me and said, Brother Bruce, would you please pray? Said, our son-in-law, and so I talked with him and all as best I could. But we're thankful for that. I saw on Facebook where he was out and doing good, so I was glad and relieved to hear that. Just wanted to throw that in there. Let's get back to this. So, without taking a lot of time, I think it can be established that the book of Revelation was not totally fulfilled 2,000 years ago. Oh, no. Right. That's just I'm sorry, I don't mean to be unkind, but that's some nonsense. Now, some people, I've heard them teach, and they use the name of Neron Kaiser in the Hebrew, and it adds up to 666, and they said was the beast it was talking about. When did he ever make people not be able to buy or sell without a mark? He said, well, they explain it when they get done with it. I thought, I've heard 3 or 4 people explain that, how it was fulfilled back then, and when it gets done, I'm sorry. It doesn't fit. Now, let's go on over it. Do you remember the 4 beasts that were mentioned in Daniel? Okay, look at chapter 13, which I believe is future tense because I don't believe much of this has not happened anywhere.
Is that Daniel 13 or
Revelation, I'm sorry. Did I say Daniel?
No, you didn't say.
Okay, chapter 13 of Revelation. I wish I had about an hour to prove, even by using external evidence, some quotes of the church fathers prove that this is. I've got several of their quotes. And they said, no one taught this until 1830. So, well, that's foolish. It's not true. There were people that taught the coming of Christ in this. And they talked, one of them who was what was it? He was a disciple of Polycarp, who was a disciple of John the disciple. And he talked about the time not long here that, I don't have the quote in front of me, that John received the revelation of the apocalypse. It was considered future tense. Now, so with that, let's see what John saw. Chapter 13, I stood upon the sand of the sea. I saw a beast, one singular beast, a beast, rise up out of the sea, but he had 7 heads and 10 horns. Boy, it's a freak of nature if ever there was one. But this is all symbolic talk. And he had 10 crowns upon his heads, the name of blasphemy. Now look at verse 2 and see if you see anything that resembles Daniel 7. And the beast which I saw was like unto a what? Leopard. Did we see that? His feet were as the feet of a bear. His mouth as the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him his power and his seat and a great authority. Now, we see 3 of these beasts, but let me ask you something. Where in the world did them eagle's wings go to? They're not listed there in this beast, which is a very, very evil system. It is headed up by something that is demonic to the core. And if you'll read on, it's that system, and they erect an image to the beast and all like that. And they are the ones that cause everyone to receive a mark in their hands or in their forehead. And without it, you can't buy nor sell. I don't know that you can take that and make it fit back in first century Christianity. Some of them said, well, they had to put a little ash mark on them that they were true to the emperor of Rome. And if they didn't do that, people were told not to buy or sell it. But listen, the saints of God continued on living. There are certain times they had periods of time that was peaceful. The book of Acts declares that. I have a hard time with that theology. And I'm not trying to paint an end-time picture of failure and defeat. Let me make something clear. The gospel will not fail. It will triumph. It will do what it was sent to do, and that is save the elect of God and call them out. It's going to do that. Amen. The gospel's not going to just go to and pizzle out and that's the end of it. No, it's going to save every last one. Now, you can go on and read here, and all I'm asking you is, if this is future tense, isn't it strange that we see in the book of Daniel, the beast he mentioned there, we see their characteristics all combined in this one beast, except the eagle's wings. Now, so, and then he had 7 heads and 10 crowns, and one of his heads were wounded. And I've read books where the Antichrist was going to get shot in the head and killed, and he'll resurrect, and people will wonder. Okay, have that your way. But at any rate, these systems, with this, now, they come out with, look at verse 15. Or verse 14, and he deceiveth them that dwell on it. What's he do? He's a deceiver, the biggest liar that you ever seen in your life. That could tell, I'm talking about deceptive lies that will do much damage to those who embrace those lies. You embrace this bunch of lies that this bunch of politicians are feeding for you, it will end in ruination in your life. You begin to believe it's all right to do this and it's politically correct to do that and we ought to do it this way, and you conform to a system, and I got news for you, they do not have your good at heart. Amen. So why in the world should I want to say, well, I think we ought to get along? I can't get along. I had to look at someone recently and say, I love you, I care about you. But I have an adversary and an enemy. He's not a comic book figure. He's not some storybook, fairy tale image that's been made up. He is a literal living being. And he has a great army that follows him, and he is my adversary. We're not on speaking terms at all, never have, never will be. In fact, he hates me with a hatred that's beyond anything and will do any diabolical thing to take my joy, make my life miserable, make me stumble or trip, and just take every person he can into perdition and ruination with him. Right. And I said, you have joined forces with him by your decision. Well, I like you just fine. No, you might like me, but you're on the side of somebody that don't like me. And you've joined forces with him. You're in darkness, I'm in light. Love you, care about you, but I'm sorry. There's nothing here for us. You said, that's mean, Brother Bruce. Well, I'm getting ready to leave this world, and I think the God I serve calls for it. I can't pussyfoot around and baby and coddle up to sin. And you know what? I love my family and people, but if they don't want to do right, I've told my wife, I know. She got up this morning and staggered around stuff. I said, honey, here, let me help you back to bed. But you know something? If you don't get victory in your life, I love my loss. I love people I meet out here. There's people that God put a love in my heart for, because I find myself pleading to, why don't you get right with God? Why don't you think about God? Anyway, now, this system, it's a deceiver. I got off. And by means of those miracles which ye have power in the sight of the beast, say unto them that dwell on the earth that they should make an image to the beast, which had the wound by the sword and did live. And he had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak, cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast be killed. Now, we all know this, but look at, and he causeth all, both small and great and rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hands or their foreheads, that no man might buy or sell, save he had the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. Now, a whole sermon could be preached on that. I believe as Bert Clendenin, who was an old Pentecostal Assembly of God preacher preached that the devil's going to brand those that are his, those who've received that mark into their heart and their mind. They've aligned themselves with the system of this world. They've already took the mark, been taking it for centuries as far as that goes. But it sounds like here that there's a time designated where, okay, I'm stepping back, have at it. And the devil, although he may think he's, boy, what a fool when he plays into God's, when you play into God's hand like that, you're in trouble. Because if you think God's going to turn loose of things and get back, oh my, what am I going to do now? You think God is, I got to get off of this or we'll never get to the end of this. Now, with modern technology, this is in place and has been in place for quite some time. What does that mean for you and I? You decide that for yourself. I gave you, Brother Tom, a copy of this paper. The man that writes it worked for the government. I had the opportunity of meeting him. In fact, I scheduled him for a meeting in our area, and he come. I got to talk to him. He had written a book about how he discovered a plan in place. Now, let's take for a moment, let's take this, it doesn't even exist. It doesn't matter. There is a plan in place. There is an agenda by great world powers and men of great wealth and power to have a one world system. They're called globalists.
That's right. That's right.
They used to hide it. They don't hide it no more. That does exist in our time. Whether it means anything or not, I don't know, but it does exist. You decide. Is this plan of a one world government, does it fit Revelation 13? It does in fact, minus a set of eagle's wings, which I ask myself, is it possible that Donald Trump, with all of his rough edges and things that he gets up there and says sometimes, it's so good, oh, it's going to be so great, oh, it's going to be, you know, you all seen him do that, haven't you?
Yeah.
But could God take an imperfect man like that and use him to either halt that agenda in this country altogether or to at least slow it down for a while?
Yes. Yes.
Looks like it. I don't know. I can't say for sure. I ain't had no angels visit me lately and tell me no different. In this paper, this man that I talk about, I think all of you got one. If you haven't read it, you ought to read it, because he gives the facts that this agenda is using. Now, first off, he acknowledges the COVID-19 is a real virus. It is highly contagious, and it is very lethal. That's what we gather from what we've heard and seen. But I myself don't know. This is my opinion. You got yours. We're all entitled to an opinion. That I don't know that it merits some, underscore the word some, of the actions that have been taken. You have got governments now, and what shook me, I've listened. I'm telling you, I'm going to mention a name here, but I watched a video yesterday and I sat back and went, oh my goodness. Do any of you know the name? I'm going to use a little liberty. It's not a church name, by Ammon Bundy. Does that mean anything? All right. Ammon Bundy, his father, and some other farmers out in Oregon. I remember watching and seeing, I don't know the whole story, but they had a standoff with the federal government because the government was taking their land and all. They said, no, we've had enough of you. And there was a big standoff out there. One of them got killed. Well, they put Mr. Bundy and his father in prison, but they fought it and they were exonerated and they're free. Well, Mr. Bundy made a videotape yesterday. And he said, you can like me or whatever you think of me, but said, here's what's going on. And he played clips from the governor of Washington. I wished I'd have wrote all the quotes down here for you. There are 5 of these governors, and brother, they're in this thing thick. They have no intention of you going back to normal. You know why? Because they care about your safety and your well-being. This guy said, if a child is in your home and you have the COVID or it has the COVID, and he even passed a bill, showed what it was, FR 6666 or something like that across it. They want to pass this law or going to pass it or something. They can come in and remove the child from your home and put it in a safe place. Not only that, if you are quarantined and told to stay at home, and you find you can't stay at home, then we may have to send the authorities to put you in a place where you'll be safe. You can go on YouTube and watch it. I'd encourage you if you haven't took it down. It's on my wall on Facebook, as a matter of fact. I posted it. Go watch it. It's not just some nut rattling off some stuff. He's playing stuff from the governor of Washington. Now, Gary Carr in this article shows where this agenda has and from what I gather and from what other believers that I've talked to, Brother Tom and I, this is sort of a dry run.
That's it.
This is a precursor of enforcing what you see in here. And guess what? I know this. There's a lot of people in this country that's done locked and loaded and said no. What will that lead to? I don't know. What about the judgments that's been prophesied on this country? Well, let me tell you this. A judgment can strike a country, and to me we're due one, because I don't know that God's going to allow all this blood of these unborn millions of babies run in our streets and gutters and ignore that or overlook it. But judgment can come on a nation and reduce it, because judgment does not necessarily mean annihilation.
That's right. That's right.
So just think about these things. What do I think? I'm not sure at this point. I just wanted to this is what he says after laying a whole bunch of facts down here, including Bill Gates and all of them. He says, here's the bottom line. I underlined this, and if y'all got that up, you'll see it. Right? It said, dedicated globalists involved in, quote, solving the COVID-19 pandemic are also putting in place a one-world cashless commerce system that will include a device-free digital identification mark for every human being. The UN's World Government Agenda, in cooperation with its closest allies, has permeated and is driving the international response to the coronavirus. These are not words of a madman. These are words of truth. And most people, well, I don't believe that's it, because we'd be gone. Well, what if you do see some of this? What if the shadow of it falls on you and you have to deal with some of it or something? It says if pro-UN globalists can't pull off their New World Order on this round, they'll learn from this experience, make adjustments, and try again later. Now, guys, I may have done a poor job in what I wanted to share with you, but I wanted to share these possibilities, that it may be possible that America doesn't align itself totally with this thing, and that we're given a little reprieve here, a little bit, or maybe, I don't know, in this next election, if you see it all turn red, and you see them arrest that bunch up there, and a bunch of them go to jail, we've been given a good rest there.
Amen. That's right.
As a matter of fact, we may, I don't know how it'll come down, but we may not be subjected to some things that you say, well, we're all going to be going before it gets bad. Listen, I just yesterday was on a podcast from a man from Europe who works directly with the house church in China and in North Korea. They're doing underground work. They made little pills looking things. It's got the Bible on it. They're getting the Word of God in those places. In Iran and down in Iraq, he was an ex-Marine, and I've listened to them. You should hear of some of the suffering of people who proclaim the name of Christ. It don't get much worse. They've also, China's got cameras in, and you're on a point system like your credit is, and if they're watching how can they do it? In major cities, they've got all this technology set up, and they can tell a guy what he says inside of his house. And if they see you bow your head and pray over your food, you are marked, you're liable to go walking on a bus to drive across town, and they look, and because you're already identified with this card and everything, they might say, you can't ride. You can't leave the country. You can't fly on an airplane. You can't this. You can't, well, you can't buy. I'm sorry, we can't honor that here. And if they're living in a government apartment, which many do, they're thrown out on the street. They're already living under that. That's a fact. I know it. Now, I'm not trying to scare you, but I'm saying we at least ought to be concerned enough to keep our eyes on these events as they are transpiring and ask God Almighty to give us help and give us insight, because God, I don't want something to catch me totally unaware and unprepared and spiritually cool and dead and quiet and cold and living unto myself. I'm growing more and more where this world means less and less to me. And you know something? My own family said, don't you ever want to do anything to have fun? It ain't fun to me. Oh, I'll go. You want to have a picnic over, so I'll go with you, but I'd rather be home poring over this. Now, in closing, I could say a whole lot more. But with all of this and what I've just read here, and you are looking at one of the greatest battles raging in our government right now that I have ever seen. Brother Tom, have you ever seen any? I've never seen nothing like it. I'm not bringing politics in. People say, oh, you're just an old die-hard Republican. Republicans is as rotten as the other side is. The right and the left wing belong to the same bird. I see it from a spiritual standpoint of view. I've said it before and I'll say it again. When Donald Trump began running, I honestly looked back and I thought, oh boy. First I thought, is this the best we can do? Yeah. I did. I thought that. I thought, this guy, this Hollywood billionaire guy, is this, oh, for Pete's, we're done. We are, you know. And I thought, the poor guy is just going to be, he stood up there on that cage and raised his hand a time or two, and I thought, he's done before he gets started. And then come into the election time, and of course the Democrats was eating him with everything they could. And of course they would maybe they held back a little because they were convinced it's a slam dunk.
That's right. That's right.
Hillary's in, we know it. They'll get the champagne ready, get ready to celebrate, boys. We're going to have a time tonight. The news media, I wouldn't believe hardly a thing any of them said. If they said good morning, I doubt it.
Yeah.
I'd like to look at them and I'd like to say, how are you going to fare when you stand before God and He exposes you for the liar you are? You've twisted facts. You've sold yourself out to the devil. Hey, Judas Iscariot at least got 30 pieces of silver out of the deal. You sold your soul for less, for a few moments of fame and fortune. You stood on there and mimicked and told lie things, blasphemed, things you knew were a lie. And I saw that, and the Democrats eating him. Then people in his own party began turning on him. Then they circulated these things about him, saying vulgar stuff about women and all. And I said, that's it. That's it. It's over. We sat down there with some of the family members there in the house, and we was talking about it, even on election. Now, I said, let me tell you something. If that guy wins after all of this, you can well bet the hand of God was in this through and through, and He's got a purpose in this greater than any that I've ever known. Lo and behold, my mouth dropped, but I said, oh, yes, because I knew now that the Father was mine. In spite of the wickedness of this country, in spite of it, He has heard the prayers of a few humble people that said, God, I know we're wicked. I know we've associated with the sin of this country. I know that we are. But, oh God, if you could some way, for the sake of those pilgrim fathers that gave their lives to have a country where you would be honored and your book would be free to be distributed and we could send it to the world and missionaries out. Oh God, for the sake of that, could you just have a little mercy for us? And for that reason, that man was put in. Now we're coming up on another election, and I don't know if you've noticed, but they have tried everything. Their whole campaign, their whole everything, as they haven't done one thing to try to pass bills and stuff. And until here recently, some of the most insane stuff I've ever seen. But it's all been about get that guy out. Well, they failed. They've used this virus now with the economy tanking. And guess what? I don't think that's working so well. His approval ratings are up. The governor, one of them governors, I think it was California, or one of them stood up and said, you know, I have to commend the president. He come through for us on this virus. So in my opinion, looking at the scripture we read, if those scriptures in Daniel and they're related to the same beast over in Revelation, if that takes in the countries that will make up the last world power that will be destroyed by Christ, if it does, then somehow America is taken out of that equation. Some way. I don't know. I encourage you, George Washington, if you want to believe it, but at Valley Forge, he had a vision. It's written, you can go look it up. And he saw the country just being destroyed until finally the mercy of God said, hold it, and he spared it, and it was able to at least hobble along. Now, I don't know if that's going to take place or not, but I give things like that consideration. The possibility does exist. Now, I don't want you to turn to it, but let me read to you very quickly. In Psalm 78, where God spoke about Israel and how he brought them up out of Egypt and how they done this and done that and all. Because now I want to say, what kind of a person should you and I be? How should we view all of this? For me, there's much uncertainty. And I'm going to tell you, when I get these guys, well, I can line you out on that. Boy, I have some of them put some stuff on my YouTube stuff, and you ain't even worth answering. Because they know more than anybody knows. But he's talking about Israel here, and he said this. What did I do with my, oh my. You all seen me, what did I do with it? In verse 21, speaking of Israel, he said, therefore the Lord heard this and was wroth. So a fire was kindled against Jacob, and anger also came up against Israel. Why? Verse 22 says, because they believed not in God and trusted not in his salvation. I want to ask you something. What are you trusting in? Where is your confidence at? Our faith must be placed in that which is unseen. It must be placed in that which is totally silent, that you cannot touch it. It's not tangible. We have no solid proof that it's there. But I call it the delivering power of God to keep you regardless of what happens in this country or in this world. God will not abandon you. Jesus said, I'm with you always, even to the end of the world. And if he's with me, if God be for me, then who can be against me? Well, you know, this could happen and that could happen. Let that happen. But my soul and my salvation is secure in him forevermore. And I know if they get their way, and I say they, I mean the evil crowd, it will be but just a temporary thing. And what they have done in getting their way, it will show that they played right into the hand of God. I'll take what's going on now. Everything they've tried has backfired on them and made them look like fools and idiots. And they can't see it or don't want to see it. Even an old guy like me can say, guys, why don't you be quiet? Because you have really made an idiot and fool of yourself. Get on there and tell some more lies, news media. Spew out some more of that nonsense. We know what you are. You're liars. Now, he said they didn't believe in God and they trusted not in His salvation. Now, the agenda says this, that they're going to require this is just what's being said. They're going to require everybody to get a vaccine. Boy, we want you safe. We want you to, and at that time, this chip that they've already got that some countries are using, I've heard certain things saying Sweden got it in full swing. They just walk around, beep, and it's done and all like that. Could that be this which the book of Revelation is talking about?
I believe it. I believe it.
Then if it is, don't you take it.
Right.
Well, I'm going to be out of here. We ain't out of here yet. I don't know when we're going. We're going somewhere along the line. Now, regardless of what happens, if your trust is in Jesus, you can stand there just as calmly. Won't you take this? Nope. We're going to take your license from you. Okay. Anything else you want? We're going to take your checking account. Boy, they'd really be getting something if they got a hold of mine. And they remembered that God was their rock. That's verse 35. And the high God, their Redeemer. Don't you forget. Don't you forget that God just doesn't save you so you can be a nice little boy or a little girl.
That's right.
He has His eye upon you. The wind cannot blow against you without His knowledge. A bird doesn't fall out of the nest without Him knowing about it. I'm going to tell you, they can't wag, a dog can't wag its tail against you without Him knowing it. Oh, what, doesn't this bother you? They're talking about putting everybody in a cage and put me in wherever you want. You see, my salvation, my soul, and that which the Savior has imparted, and the blessed assurance that I have in Him cannot be taken from anybody, or from me, by anybody rather. So, in these troublesome times when you see the government in turmoil, my word of advice is pray for the leaders of your country. The Bible tells New Testament believers pray for the leaders and those in authority. And He said if you do that, that'll have an effect and you'll live a peaceable life. It says that. So pray very much for this. Pray for God to foil the agenda of the left. Foil the agenda.